Hello, folks. Welcome to another date on This Morning. I am Citizen Jones Hussein. And this morning we are visualizing an Islamic State cell in Nigeria. You know, the news broke early in the week that the dreadful Islamic State, also known as IS, has cells in Nigeria. And millions were terrified and fought hard to believe this story. Now, security agencies drove the point home when they not only identified cells in Edo, Kogi, Benue, but revealed that suspects had been nabbed in these places. For a country that has learned to live dangerously for a while now, visualizing an Islamic State cell in our beloved country was only a matter of time. Let's have a conversation this morning, please. Let me introduce my guest. Let's meet and greet Reverend Ladi Thompson. Is a security consultant and, by extension, strategic thinking expert. Welcome.
Pleasure is mine.
Strategic thinking expert. Break that down.
Well, you must know that man, what makes man unique. Remember there's a book President Obasanjo wrote, The Animal Called Man. Well, that quote actually came from Cicero, the philosopher, the Roman philosopher.
Okay, the title of the book.
Yes, It came from a quote from Cicero. And what Cicero was saying was that amongst all the creatures that God had made, man was different. And he stated the qualities of man that the most distinct is that man has the ability to think and to process thoughts. And that's actually why man is more like God and can appreciate God than all other creatures.
Maybe this is why we say man is the ultimate creation.
Absolutely.
And God, the ultimate being.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
See.
Now, visualizing or imagining an Islamic State cell in Nigeria, years ago would have been far-fetched.
I wouldn't want to agree with you.
Okay.
And I'll give you practical reasons why. I would say to you that the country had been in denial for a long time. And also, the country had also been a victim of one of the aspects of what we call the displacement sequence by which the cells work. And that's because one of the aspects is that they also have an arm in media. So usually, they also control media. In the early phases, they like to work undetected. So they actually would have people all over media in strategic places, using their understanding to control flow of information, to limit it, to make sure that the country does not connect the dots. I should know this because we began to connect the dots around 1999. By 2000, 2003, it was obvious that Nigeria had this problem. But we saw that...
What problem?
The problem of this Islamism is what it's called, really, Islamism. And the country...
Fundamentalism, if you like.
Yes, if you so like. And it was obvious that there was a process already going on in Nigeria, infiltrating the country, but people were in denial. I think what actually began to break this was the fact that what people call Boko Haram, that generic Boko Haram, was actually created by the Western press. Frankly speaking, there's really nothing like Boko Haram. What you had all along was the cell structure that was proliferating already in Nigeria. It was already connected. There were trainings going on. There were people visiting Nigeria from outside the country coming to teach them how to behead, coming to teach them how to make bombs. The terror intelligence had already begun to affect operations in Nigeria from machetes. They began to use low velocity ammunitions and all that, and it graduated to mixing IEDs and all that. So the signature has been in Nigeria all along, but based on the modus operandi of how this thing works, they've been able to contain, the knowledge of their presence within the country. So all of a sudden right now, finally, I tell you many years ago, we wanted to get some news into the press. We saw some...
Who are we?
Well, at that time, I was advising the Khan president for that time. Now, normally when this thing comes into a country, the first set of people it likes to mop up first are those who are of the Christian persuasion of religion. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the only ones, but they're the first in its line. It eats up that first. So you begin to notice the antics because they introduce certain things. If you remember the Federal Medical Center in Azari in 2000, just after all the promises that there will be no discrimination and the Constitution will not be breached, sacked a number of nurses because they would not put on the hijab in a Federal Medical Center in Azari in Bauchi. Now, when you see things like that, first of all, it's not right for the Constitution. Secondly, there's an intelligence behind those things. So at that time, we tried to put into the newspapers, or by then, of course, there had been killings going on, and every time we tried to get the newspapers to publish and all that, they would reject it. Now, we thought this one...
Because of infiltration?
Oh, yes, the control media. You see, if you don't know this thing, you fall into these traps because they have subtle people, they have influence, they invest in media quietly, and they will help you to know what goes into the news, what must not be reported. So I can even tell you this, that when we saw that case of the sacking of the nurses, we said, look, this doesn't involve bloodshed. Let's see whether they'll publish this and let us begin to sensitize the public as to what Nigeria is going to be experiencing in the years ahead. One of the most popular newspapers then, reputable, refused to publish. We said, okay, you know what, let us pay you. I'll take out 2 pages. And we paid them. Very harmless
as an advertorial?
Yes, as an advertorial. They would rather return our money.
After collecting it?
Yes. Rather return our money than publish. And this was the year 2000.
That's curious.
Well, for you it may be, for those of us who concatenate, who join the dots, we looked at the newspaper. I mean, it wasn't as if it was owned by the terror axis, but enough infiltration. And of course, nobody's going to come and say, don't publish this because you're going to expose us. They're going to say, don't publish this. Our professional ethics say this and that and that. And, just weave, and maybe with a little inducement here and there, So they've been able to operate invisibly for a very long time in this country. In fact, the only reason why I think the media began to cotton on was when it moved into the Middle Belt, into Plateau State, really. And the composition of Plateau State was the reason why it began to gain. Even then, they tried to contain it. I remember very well that there was an attempt, not just an attempt, there was a successful operation containing news about Plateau when the Plateau started having problems. They actually caged them, surrounded them, and, contained the news.
Of course, you're talking about the age-long feud between settlers and in Plateau, indigents in Plateau State.
Well, that's the illusion.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, if I would tell you the truth, if history books were to be written right, I remember I was talking to one of the commissioners in Plateau State when they started having problems. And right there, if I remember properly, when there was a lot of pressure on them, the governor was under intense pressure. If I will say this, that at a meeting that I had with the cabinet, there were divided opinions. A lot of people felt it was their traditional indigenes resisting, the old caliphate thing, and there was so much bravado, they'd never beaten us before, and all that. And I looked at them and said,
why now?
No. You know what I said to them? You are making a grave mistake. This is not what you used to see before. This is something new. This is a resurgence that all over the world, in all countries of the world, is acknowledged that it's a reality. What you're looking at is not local to Plateau State. It has global backup. You're just seeing its local face. And if you think you can handle it with the wisdom of 30, 40 years ago, you're going to be surprised. So it had nothing to do. For instance, let me tell you something. It would never have had a beachhead if Just North local government had not been created.
Okay.
It had to be created for there to be a basis for certain types of gatherings. Okay? It would never have been.
You think that was deliberate?
Let me give you another point. Remember that when this sect that even the Muslims began to fear, JNI began to fear, the Izala, where was the headquarters of Izala put when it was formed?
If you tell me.
1978. It was in Plateau State in Jos. Now, if you ask yourself, why would you form a group like Izala, which was under the watchful eye, was being supervised by the late Sheikh Gumi,
Abubakar, yeah.
who never hid his fundamentalist views. The two young men who were leading the Izala when it was first formed, their headquarters was in Plateau State. So what people don't realize is that initially the displacement sequence works in a very interesting way. First of all, you have what they call the doctrine of migration.
Okay.
And then you begin to find out that menial workers, security guards, bike riders, those who sell nail clippers,
yeah,
and all that would begin to flood into your area. One comes in 3 years' time, you have 4, 5, 6. For those ones who had been radicalized before coming out on their mission, it's their duty. It's an obligation under the extreme doctrines of fundamentalism.
Yeah, but Ladi, you are told it's in the nature of some of these people to be nomadic, to be itinerant.
Well, you don't want to forget that the itinerance thing we're talking about, if you want to trace it back, you trace it back to what erupted in 1804.
I was not there.
Hopefully you shouldn't have been there.
Okay.
Now, you see, the truth is, Islam had been on our shores 800 years, 600 to 800 years. The Kanem Bono had been there with Islam for centuries before the migration from Futajalon by the Fulanis, who are like half castes of the African and the Arabs. When they first came in and settled, the king was so receptive, and he asked somebody to tutor his son, asked Danfodio actually to tutor his son. Now, the normal thing, of course, is that he had exemplary behavior, all things were going well, but this was an ancient form of what we're seeing today. Because he even won an award. King Bawa Jangwazo gave him an award, which he refused the honor and instead asked for favors and said, look, respect the Turban in northern Nigeria, release all prisoners, reduce your taxes. There were about 5 things he asked for. That was Usman Danfodio then. Now, while he was doing that, they were also converting and radicalizing. And why did this come out like this? It is interesting that when the jihad started in 1804, by the time you got to the Kanembus, they suffered some defeats and called on El Kanemi, who was also an Islamic cleric. So,
Of Borno.
his father was Kanembu, but his mother was Arab. So, yes, that's it. His mother was Arab, the father Kanembu. Now, this cleric was well versed in the Quran. And apart from stemming the Danfodio move on the battlefield and pushing them back, he also engaged them in a theological battle. His letters, 1808, are still available till today. So these are records that Nigerians should be allowed to access and understand. And what was El Kanemi's question? El Kanemi said, if this is a jihad and it is supposed to be against on the infidel, why are you killing Muslims? We've been Muslims way before you. And that's why you need to understand that there's a supremacist ideology that often is covered with a theology. And just like it happened in Nigeria as well, when we started out, I remember one of the Khan presidents that I was advising, I did say to him then that, look, don't think it's a Muslim versus Christian thing, because if you do that, you're going to be doing them a favor. He said, why do I say that?
Have they stopped that?
Sorry.
Has Khan, C-A-N, stopped that?
Well, I want to believe that Khan right now is interrogating the situation and is investigating a lot and learning more and learning fast. I used to be special advisor to the immediate past CAN president on counterterrorism. So I want to believe that the present CAN president would be on the lookout and be careful not to...
More circumspect.
Yes, because of course it's psychological. People would rather make it a religious war and make it worse.
Ladi, I want us to resist the temptation of making this, an educative session.
Okay.
But don't, let's come to now, fast forward to now.
Okay.
The DSS made it public over the last weekend. IS cells in West Africa are in Nigeria. So that's nothing to sweep under the carpet. But we live in a country where religious sentiments run riot, and you hear things like, especially from your part of Christianity, it is not our portion. Now it is our portion. What to do from here?
Well, again, I think what we need to do is we must remember that truth will always win. And let's take it from this. I remember that Abubakar Tafawa Balewa in 1960, on the 8th of October, was speaking at the UN General Assembly in New York.
I respect your sense of history. Yeah, let's go.
Truth.
Let's go.
What he said then was that, look, 1 week ago, I'm quoting some parts of his speech, that Nigeria gained its independence and that prayers were offered by 3 different faiths. And he diplomatically, in 1960, pointed out that there will be troubles in the years ahead. And diplomatically said, at that time, when the world is calling for peace, he said he believed that if Nigeria would engage universal truths, that would lead us to the right future.
Underline that, universal truths.
Which means we need to go beyond religion into universal truths.
Truism. Yeah.
Truism. For us to... Now, if we take his counsel from 1960, where we're at right now, we have been in denial for a long time. This is not the first time. The infiltrations have been going on for a long time. The training has been going on for a long time. And if you had listened to many interviews I'd done before this, I had said that because most of the Mujahideen were preoccupied with ISIS and in other fronts all over the world, was why Nigeria was enjoying, a window in which I was saying then we need to put some things into place quickly.
Namely?
Because once they mop them up in other parts of the world, Nigeria, let me tell you what Nigeria is going to see in the days ahead if we don't put some things into order.
And what you're going to say now is not a vision. It's based on what you think might be.
Well, why don't you listen to it first, and then you make up your mind whether it's visionary or whatever. Now, so far what you have seen is homegrown terrorists, people who have been radicalized, and of course the ancient narrative that has been dusted up once the threat, which it changes shape, shifted its main force from the Boko Haram into this present Fulani herdsman narrative. Now, there's going to come a time when it's not going to be the Fulanis that you and I are used to seeing, but you're going to see olive skin color of Arabs, more of the Berbers, who are even different from the Fulanis right now. When you begin to see them with superior weaponry, greater expertise, and battle-trained people, when you begin to see them influx more into Nigeria, is when you would realize that, of a truth, these are things we should have taken care of a long time ago.
Rather than wishing them away.
Well, rather than, yes, in a way you're right, rather than playing ostrich or allowing ourselves to be deceived into the chaos of a religious war.
Okay. And it thrives on a culture of fear, terror, targeting young boys. That's another phase.
Well, again, like I said, I think what we need to do is that we need to interrogate these things properly, because what you're talking about is just like one little finger in the displacement sequence. When you talk about young boys, it's not only young boys it targets. No. What you're dealing with here is something that was perfected into a global franchise by Osama bin Laden and Zawahiri. And what they did was that they simply looked at companies like Nike, the international companies.
Popular.
Yes, and learned from them that you need central administration. You need an organization and an organism. So they had businessmen grouped together to help to move money around the world to wherever the money was needed.
And these are converts.
Yes, well, these are all, some are closet terrorists, some are sympathists. Some are people who are deceived into it by the religious sentiment.
Sorry, as a digression, how would you rationalize or place Zakzaki, El Zakzaki, am I right? Yaqub's group?
Zakzaki.
Yeah.
You want to remember that all along there's always been a theological difference of opinion between Sunnis and Shiites. And you want to remember that what Danfodio actually started here had more of the Sunni. So the majority are Sunnis. Now, remember there was a revolution in Iran in '79. And at that time, young Nigerians who were Muslims were, and some converts were taken into Iran and trained.
Let's pause a while and take Judge in Ikeja here in Lagos. Judge, welcome.
Good morning.
I greet you. Yeah.
And good morning to the guest.
Good morning, George.
Citizen, this issue of IS, the news, it's not news.
Thank you. Thank you.
3 years ago, Boko Haram announced in one of their videos that they have since been affiliated to ISIS. So if 3 years after, security men are telling us that ISIS is not news. What I would not want to agree with them is that ISIS is responsible for this Fulani men's figure. The herdsmen's figure has nothing to do with ISIS. We all know how ISIS operates. You know how they operate. Their modus operandi is not the same as what we are seeing as that of these herdsmen. I'm saying that it should not be used as a cover. Let them do their work and bring these killers to book. The Benue incident, the killers have not been brought up, to book up to now. They have not even been fished out. Let them fish them out. We don't want to be hearing stories about.
Judge, that's your point. And again, I cannot go against your views. But as a responsive and responsible media house, ours is to rake these things up every once in a while. And that's what we are doing. Yeah, he has knocked pigtails with.
Yes.
Said earlier on. You don't link.
As a matter of fact, as he spoke, I could cut the passion in his voice. And I'm going to say something quickly here, that these are part of the errors we should not make. You see, the machinery of global terror is so cleverly designed that it is a shape shifter and it has many heads. And if you look at the ancient Fulani narrative by itself, and you see what had been happening in Nigeria before, you will see that the modus operandi of this new one is light years ahead in terms of logistics, in terms of planning. What has just happened?
And execution.
And execution. You see, what has just happened is this. The intelligence behind global terror had all along been infiltrating. And when the Boko Haram began to become a pariah, when they went and kidnapped too many girls, and when Shekau would talk carelessly, they became more of a liability in Nigeria.
Ladi, it would be interesting to
so
get
the
to
shape shifted.
It would be interesting to get to hear what Abubakar in Kano has for us. Welcome, Abubakar.
Hello, good morning.
I greet you. Welcome.
Let me contribute to what you are discussing now.
Go on.
One thing we should understand and draw our attention to is Nigeria is one. And we must try to maintain this unity irrespective of ethnicity or religion. Let us address this issue objectively and squarely. What the other gentleman was saying, I think there is a little bit of truth in it. Because we have to realize that the Fulani we knew 1,000 years ago were not the real Fulani now killing one another or killing Nigerians. Religion apart, we must understand that there's a foreign intervention in Nigeria that are trying to cause Nigeria and divide us. Whether you are Hausa or Yoruba or Igbo, we are one. So if care is not taken, there is going to be an inter-rival and inter-religious conflict, which we wouldn't want it to happen in Nigeria. So let us, focus our mind on who are these people and who are funding them. Because one thing we must realize is that unemployment in Nigeria has a role to play in our youth.
Yeah.
If they have something doing, there would not be an idle mind, so that they can be trained and be given soft loans to these foreigners to cause trouble in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Let's focus our attention in the development of our nation.
All right.
For sustenance.
Thank you, Abubakar. Many thanks. Reb, it was obvious that very soon these people, these infiltrations were going to exploit the religious and ethnic fault lines. So here we are.
We should applaud him for the first part of his contribution from Kano, because he has just said something that is so crucial to the survival of Nigeria that I can only pray that people in authority, both on the Christian end and the Islamic end, will pay attention to what he has just said, the first part of his contribution, and which is the fact simple that these terrorists are usually a minority, and they need a religious cover to be able to recruit, to radicalize and recruit. Now, when Christianity responds, religion is a very volatile thing. Okay, let me even say to this, we need to really, I always like to say that Nigeria owes, people have different views, but personally I worked with Pastor Ayo Orisha, and I think Nigeria owes him something, and I'll tell you why.
We'll talk about what we owe him.
No, we need to nail his
But I'm
his
keeping
delivery.
a caller waiting.
Oh, okay.
Maxwell is in Tema, Ghana. Maxwell, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. James. Good morning, and good morning to Reverend Ladi.
We greet you.
If you remember, if anybody tells you that IS or Islamic cells are just being, coming to Nigeria today or last year, tell that person that Maxwell, judging from my own experience in the Nigerian army since 1993, that person is telling you a grave lie, and we are making a grave mistake. See, they do come and go. When they come, if you have a government that has the political power to suppress them, at that point in time, they will lie low. You remember the Mekasina issue in Kaduna? You remember the introduction of Sharia 2000 in Kaduna State too? All these things happen in a place where they are not where they want to control. And during that time, 2000, Obasanjo suppressed them and gave them options. You see, you cannot introduce something that is going to affect the other states. And once you do that, it will be contrary to the Constitution of Nigeria. So it has been there for a long, long time. For them to discover it now is not a news to me, Mr. Jones. Have a great day in Lagos, and God bless Nigeria.
Bless you too. Maybe not a new thing to the DSS, but that it's been made public for the first time is something we should all latch onto. I'm not in the intelligence service. Thank you, Maxwell. We'll take this break, come back, return to Reverend Ladi Thompson. First, he tells me what we as a people owe Pastor Ayo Orisha for. I can't wait for that. Please, let's go on this break and return. Okay, welcome back. I hope you are not losing it. Visualizing an IS cell or cells in Nigeria with Boko Haram booting, we can honestly say it was in the making many years ago. My guest here, Reverend Ladi Thompson, has a lot more information that you would have asked for. Yeah, Ayo Ishejafo we are indebted to him. In what way?
Let me put it like this. I remember that there was once he got a phone call. I think it was from Yobe State. Somebody was calling him and saying, save us. A lot of noise in the background. Then a gunshot, and then the phone went dead. Now, I remember that from that point
You don't
onwards,
think that was dramatized?
No, it wasn't. I mean,
okay.
Let's not delude ourselves. This has been a reality for a long time. Now, up until that time, the terrorist organizations in Nigeria were deceiving the Nigerian public, and there was no head to it. It was under Ayo that we said, look, there's nothing that will help us in Nigeria better than for the Boko Haram to be recognized as a foreign terrorist organization by the United States of America. And it was under his watch that an ambassador was raised. We, first of all, hosted a congressional visit. So they managed to go to all the places to see what was going on because the reports were not really getting to the United States government. It was under him that we had the opportunity for him as a statesman, not as a representative of just the Christian front, in 2012 to go for a hearing on whether or not the Boko Haram should be labeled as a foreign terrorist organization.
In Nigeria.
Everybody, if you go back to the headlines around that time, vilified him at that time. I remember one Senator Waku especially. They vilified him. Why would you go and do such a thing? Why would you advocate for such a thing? And it was not easy because I was with him in Washington, and when we got to Washington, they said the Boko Haram was actually a freedom fighting group. And up until that time, Nigeria did not know whether Boko Haram was ethnic. They didn't know whether it was because of
religious.
poverty. They didn't know whether it was religious. They didn't know it was a hydra, you see. So it was, a lot of other people had been advocating for the FTO. But I can tell you something, that Ayo's visit, Pastor Ayo's visit to Washington was the final nail that helped to persuade.
Okay. On the unbelieving hearts. Let me take Ibrahim.
And the FTO was crucial. Without the FTO, Boko Haram till today will be operating under cover in Nigeria.
Okay. Let me take Ibrahim in Abuja. Welcome, Ibrahim.
Thank you. Good morning.
I greet you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
You are on, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. While Reverend Ladi is talking, it is true that we have infiltrations in this country. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You are on. Go on.
But I want to make some clarifications because when he was talking about Izala, Shia, and then Boko Haram, please, I want him to understand that the whole Muslims in Nigeria categorically dissociate themselves from Boko Haram. So when you talk of Islamization, it's not as if these organizations, because he talked about the Izala, it's just, I don't know the intention as he was saying, it was created by Gumi and headquarters was Jos. I don't know the link he's trying to do with that, with then the formation or intention of people to Islamize Nigeria. First, like when the issue of bank, I'm talking of Islamic Bank came, people were thinking that there is one way of Islamizing Nigeria. But we discovered that people who are not Muslims actually partake. What I'm trying to point out is this. You should make clarification between what the Muslims are saying. Nigeria, indivisibility of Nigeria is one of our points. We don't want Nigeria to be divided. But I don't want to think that the Muslims in Nigeria are supporting the issue of anybody coming here to come and divide us and come and Islamize Nigeria. That phobia, that statement are always been coming from, particularly the Khan, talking about Islamize to Nigeria. to make Nigeria to be one country. If God had wanted us all to be Muslims in Nigeria, he would have done that. But Christians and Muslims all have stakes in this country. And there is no single Muslim that will say we don't want any Christians in this country.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to say, the reverend should understand, is that the Boko Haram is not a sect that is legalized by Muslims.
Okay.
And we do not support that Boko Haram are coming here to actually move the cause of Muslims in Nigeria. No.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you. Reb, new insights. I don't think you are vowed to that.
No, but he has to be a bit more. You see, sometimes you need a scalpel, not a machete. The scalpel that the surgeon uses. What he needs to understand is that while this thing is a global thing, it has local faces, as it exploits divisions and exploits cracks and also exploits religion. And in this case, it exploits the Islamic religion. This is a reality. Yes, this is a reality that cannot be swept under the carpet. Secondly, if he goes back deep enough to go and listen to the tapes of Sheikh Gumi when he was the Grand Qadi, and even read his books. In fact, Gumi was one of the people who was very much against...
Do Nigerians read?
Well, Gumi was one of the people who was very much against Western education. He said it openly, and a lot of his views were very fundamentalist. And in fact, if you do your research thoroughly, you'll find out that Gumi moved away from the JNI because he felt they were too accommodating. And even the Izala he knows was very much feared. And what I'm saying is this, is that when the global comes to the local front, it looks for fault lines, radicalizes further, and then moves forward. If we don't accept that, we're in a delusion, because this is why he spoke about Khan. You don't blame Khan for talking about an Islamization agenda. Why? Because the terrorists actually want an Islamization agenda as a cover for their own ends, which actually is a supremacist
ideology.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what he needs to know is that some of the things that the radicals, the global radicalism has brought into Nigeria is contaminous with some of what our own local homegrown radicals had already believed.
So the soil is fertile enough here.
Precisely.
Yeah. Let's get to hear what Mazi Okorafor is saying in Arochukwu. Welcome, Mazi.
Good morning, Mr. Jones. Good morning, our guests, our residents. You see, Nigeria is a country with experts in different professions. Like our security consultant did. You see, we are not supposed to face all this massacre everywhere. Note, IS brand of killing is cutting off people's heads, and they will agree that they are responsible with all protests and their plans. See, security work in office, villages, communities, religious organizations, anywhere is everybody's responsibility. Like what one of the callers said, if we need to empower the youth, but if you take statistics of who and who are among all these things we are talking about, look at the range. These are youth that are supposed to be what? Somewhere and be doing something. Because when youth are engaged in a meaningful job, you will not see them engaging themselves in all this brand of way. So I will encourage Nigerian government, our senators, anywhere, let them empower our youth, let them have something meaningful. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Many thanks. We cannot but talk about, we say it all the time, our porous border crossings, intelligence network, intelligence gathering.
Well, I think for the African situation, I don't really think we should be, I mean, we will talk about that, but our greater focus in the Nigerian situation and the African situation is a bit different, because the way we are structured is different. We have bigger problems than that. He mentioned, for instance, the economic angle. The truth is this: the global displacement sequence is opportunistic. So the economic depression, of course, they are capitalizing on it.
Because there's a crack, there's that crack.
There's that crack. So they will exploit fault lines. But if you make the mistake of sitting down and looking at just the economic aspect, you will miss the hydra. The meaning of a hydra means they operate with multiple heads. One head in the economy.
From one main body.
Yes, one mind, but different heads in education, in the military, you know, in the economy, in the judiciary, you name it, it's all that. And that's why I always say something. A doctor who cannot diagnose accurately will never be able to prescribe accurately what will cure the problem. And these are the things we need to look at. You and I know that when Nigeria was created, the fourth line of division, the colonial forces, are the ones who designed us to butt heads based on religion. And we never addressed it.
We'll come to that, but let me take Dayo in Ilorin. Dayo, welcome.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning to you and good morning to Reverend Ladi.
Yeah, I greet you.
Yeah, I just want to make a contribution.
You are on. Go on.
It's about the Islamic state that you were talking about. And Reverend Ladi made a point as regards Gumi. Run up to the Boko Haram if we want to be candid, because in this country we forget things easily. When Boko Haram first started, the northern people, they were a bit complacent. Even Gumi made a statement. He said any attack on Boko Haram is an attack on Islam in part of his utterances. Okay, even Malam Buhari, that is the president now, he was saying if you can give amnesty to Niger Delta, you have to give amnesty to Boko Haram. The same president.
Yeah, but he was never president at the time, yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying he's the president now, as I'm telling you.
Yeah.
He's president then or president after, is still an elder statesman in this country. And he's supposed to be a nationalist figure. Hello?
You are on.
Yeah. He's supposed, either you are the president or you are not the president, you have a stake in Nigeria as an elder statesman. The same way he's treating this bloody herdsmen. When it now becomes an hydra, he will not start talking. Let us address this thing. Learn from Boko Haram. Learn from Mastaisini. Irrespective of the religion, inclination, or your tribe. The stake we have is Nigeria. When Jonathan wanted to tackle this Boko Haram head on, Ango Abdullahi was taking out transit in Maiduguri. Gumi was taking out transit. The president now, Buhari himself, was taking out transit. If we want to move forward as a country, we have to get in all these sentiments and be pragmatic. Goodbye, sir.
Many thanks. Rev, of the many fault lines we have, religion appears to be the most lethal.
Volatile, yeah.
I'm wondering what because I know every once in a while, both the Christian community and the Islamic community, you converge. What do you discuss?
Well, under President Obasanjo, he created what they call NIREC. One of the proposals that I made to one of the current presidents I was serving was that we needed to move beyond the policy of religious dialogue. We needed to move to the level of progressive religious dialogue. And my offering then was the fact that there were actually 3 voices at the dialogue.
Isn't this semantics?
No. Listen to this carefully. When Christians and Muslims come together to dialogue, there are actually 3 voices, but we think there are 2. We think it's Muslims and Christians. No. We have Christians, we have Muslims, and we have radicals. The radicals now hide under the cover of dialogue
these radicals,
to make it look as if...
These radicals are akin to both faiths, major faiths.
No. In this case, we have to be realistic. The mosque is under pressure in Nigeria. Look, in there was a time when the pressure was on the Catholic faith, when radicalism hijacked, the age of the Crusades. So we need to be realistic to admit that the Islamic religion is the cover for the thrust of supremacy in Nigeria right now. And we can't run away from it. So at that table, they would come and put their voice. But let me tell you what I think we should be talking about more, which I'm surprised that what the man said, I can forgive anybody earlier on for having misdiagnosed this hydra. In the earlier years, it exploited all fault lines. And I'm even telling you, apart from the religious fault line, there's even the tribal fault line.
Yeah.
So everybody takes sides in Nigeria based on what they were pre-programmed to do.
Aminu is here, and I'm wondering what he's telling us. Welcome, Aminu.
My name is Aminu. I'm calling from Kano.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay. This
I would like to contribute on this issue and to clarify some issues.
Go on, sir.
I'm afraid the way the country is going on, because the religious leaders are not being specific and telling the truth. Like the person that just called Malam Ibrahim, has he forgotten that Jonathan said that he cannot attack Boko Haram because they are our brothers? But he's referring to that of Buhari. And Jonathan has made that comment while he was a sitting president. And it was his responsibility to tackle Boko Haram. But he said that he will not go and kill them because they are our brothers. So please, and at the beginning of the discussion, Reverend Ladi has mentioned a lot of history pertaining to caliphate, the Usman Dan Fodio. A lot of things there, just trying to frame a lot of things that to put even the Dan Fodio as not a jihadist. Let me tell you, before the advent of Usman Dan Fodio, there was Islam. But mid of Dan Fodio came and put the Islam on its main foundation for the Muslim to follow without mixing it with other association of other deities. Let me come. That our own present situation that we are having, the Christian association that you were in, it was formally from the north. It was Ahmadu Bello that created Christian association for northern Nigeria. The current present Khan was created in 1990s. What happened previously, before the creation of the present Khan? We were living in peace, in harmony with each other in the north. Mm-hmm. But when you people came, it has become a national. Now we have started inculcating and imparting a lot of things into the brain of our neighbors within the north, which now we are living in not in pari-passu with them.
Thank you, Aminu. Ladi, these fault lines appear to be difficult to dismantle.
Now you're talking. You have observed that even as the callers come, everybody is taking up positions based on what Nigeria was programmed to be.
But it is futile to cure the effect
without tackling
the
cause. Let me say this, the last caller. I'm ready for us to forgive everybody in the past for being deceived. Because when this thing first comes, it deceives everybody, divides you, hoping you will fight each other, and then he will weaken you from within and then finish you. However, we have to admit truths where people have been deceived before. For instance, the Kano is talking about, I regularly have been in Kano through the years. The amount of blood shed I've seen in Kano is something that should not even be discussed at all. So if we choose to be magnanimous enough, when Reverend Fadipe was the Kan chairman in Kano State, you go and find out when people will be boiling pepper to throw pepper in the eyes of people who are shooting guns at you. Should we tell you how many people were buried, how many dead bodies, the savage execution, and all the kind of things that have gone on through the years in Kano, and how much relief we had to pour in quietly? Please, I think what we need to do...
You are getting emotive.
No.
It doesn't help
it's
us.
good for us to nail something and then solve the problem. Letting everybody know that sheath your swords and let's move forward.
Let me take Divine in Apapa, Lagos here. Welcome, Divine.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, sir.
And good morning to the guests in the studio.
My pleasure.
Yes, what I want to say is that we should forget the issue of tribalism. This is the major problem we are having in this country. We publicize everything. Because if you say the truth, they will go against you. But the truth will always remain. Let us come together as a country and fight these things once and for all. But in as much as we don't believe in the Igbo man, the Yoruba man, the Hausa man, the TV man, we are getting problems. Now, the reason is this. Before, they were killing the Igbos in the north. Nobody was saying something. But now the killing have escalated to every tribe. And now every eyes are beginning to open. Let us know shy. Let us know, and we are not doing anything about it. The government, they will tell you that there is Islamic State in Nigeria. Where is our army forces? Where are they? This is our publicized. You will discover even then when they were going for the army are going to Boko Haram. We hear that some of them say that you cannot go except the commander tell you, or the commander will even direct you where the enemies are. They will finish those troops at the early stage. So what are we saying?
All right.
This is a political.
All right.
We present everything.
Divine,
Thank you.
that's why every Nigerian has to, quote, end quote, shine eye. Ladi?
Yes, what he again is showing us and demonstrating again are the polarity that exists in the Nigerian equation, in our narrative. And if Nigeria is ever going to survive, we are all going to have to do one thing: acknowledge that there's an external intelligence way beyond anything we've ever faced before that has quietly been undermining and creating further divisions in Nigeria. And we should take stock, come to a conclusion, and unite on what I had quoted from our former first prime minister. Eternal truisms, only the truths that are eternal. If we take temporal truths, Nigeria will burn. Now, what does he mean by eternal truths? Let me give you one of the solutions, because I don't like us talking about problems without us helping people to know in which direction we should be going.
The solution is very vital, but then let me take Malik in Kano. Malik, welcome.
Good day, Uncle Jones.
I greet you.
Yes, I welcome the panelists there.
Thank you.
Yeah. You see, the problem we are having in this country is that we are just too tribalistic. We are shy away from saying the truth. You see, the problem, I thought when we started this program with Reverend Ladi, I mean, what I thought he knew much about history. But the way he's talking, I don't know, it's like he's taking one part. I wish he's not supposed
Malik,
to be like
correct him. Malik, correct him.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Which side?
So,
Which side?
if you want to, educate people, you shouldn't take one part. You should be very straightforward. You are talking about Khan, you are talking about Boko Haram. We Muslims, we disassociate ourselves from...
How long have you lived in Kano?
No, allow him.
How long?
No, listen to him. Listen to him.
Sorry.
You understand? So I don't think if you can tell me about Kano, and I'm a Muslim. You know, so you shouldn't, if you are talking, you shouldn't bring saying that Muslims are in support of Boko Haram. It doesn't make sense. You understand what I'm saying? So, I mean, we Muslims, even when we associate ourselves from Boko Haram, which many people know about it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not like that. So
Okay.
if you want to make sense, we should be talking about how this country will move forward. Not any good Muslim believes in killing of any innocent person.
Yeah. Even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, never asked you to kill people. He never. I'm not a good student of the Quran, but I know that as a holy book, it has tenets. Malik, thank you, Malik. Reverend Ladi, before you give me the solution, because there must be a solution, when you talk about telling the truth, question is, whose truth?
Well, that's why I believe that Tafawa Balewa helped all of us when he, the first prime minister of the country.
First and only.
Yes, I said to you that he helped Nigeria a lot prophetically when on the 8th of October in 1960, he mentioned the fact that there will be problems ahead diplomatically and said the only thing that would help us is not just, like he said, truisms from one perspective or the other, but eternal truths that cannot be disputed, irrespective of location, irrespective of the century you came, irrespective of where you're coming from, or where you were born, when you were born. There are certain things that are true, irrespective of all factors. They remain true from now till eternity. He was gracious enough to drop that hint in 1960. Now, if we want to look at what we call eternal truths, we have to rise beyond religion. And one of the eternal truths that nobody can ever dispute that can help to unite Nigeria is when the government realizes that in our foundation there are divisions.
Yeah, you're closing your thoughts now.
There are divisions in our foundation. The divisions were sent to exploit us, to keep us, it's called a deterministic chaos, to keep us in a permanent state of chaos, never developing. And to shut down the religious divide, let me just mention one thing we need to do. We need to visit the truth that all men, Christians, Muslims, all over the world, no matter who you are, the first office in which we know God is in his office as the creator. And if you just accept that we can base governance on a platform where we accept that anything that is obvious based on God in his office as creator should be the basis of governance for Nigeria, then we will have hope. Because before you become a Muslim, before you become a Christian, before you become anything, you are first created and you accept that I am created by God.
We must end there. Let me, Reverend Ladi Thompson, let me confess, you are the interviewer's delight. I admire your sense of history, which is the essence of learning and understanding. You know, we say we don't like history, and I don't know where that came from. Okay, then my punchline is simply this. As a Muslim, as a Christian, as an animist, when you pray for peace, your prayer will not change God, it will change you, the man who says the prayer. On that note, let me say thank you. There's another program tomorrow morning. Bye-bye now.